In the last chapter, Hayek shows how central planning elevates the worst kind of people, how power concentrates in the hands of those most willing to use it. Now he turns to something quieter, but perhaps more dangerous. What happens to truth itself when the state claims authority over economic life? Chapter 11 is titled, The End of Truth. And Hayek's claim is stark. When planning becomes total, truth becomes political. Wise planning cannot tolerate dissent. Central planning requires agreement. If the economy is to be directed toward a single goal, then disagreement becomes a problem, not merely an inconvenience, but a threat. A free society can tolerate conflicting visions. A planned society cannot. Because if the plan is to succeed, the public must believe in it. Confidence becomes essential. Criticism becomes destabilizing. And so dissent gradually shifts in meaning. It is no longer debate, it is sabotage. Propaganda as structural necessity. Hayek makes a crucial move here. He does not say propaganda emerges because planners are evil. He says it emerges because planners must maintain unity. If outcomes fall short, confidence must be preserved. If shortages appear, explanations must be supplied. If goals shift, narratives must adjust. The more comprehensive the plan, the more comprehensive the messaging must be. Truth becomes subordinate to coordination. Facts become tools of morale. The subtle pressure to conform. There is another layer here. Propaganda is not always loud. It does not always shout. Sometimes it simply rewards agreement. Careers depend on alignment. Institutions depend on funding. Research depends on approval. And over time, people internalize the boundaries. They learn which questions are welcome, which doubts are dangerous. No police are required. Incentives are sufficient. The result is not universal lying, it is selective silence. The shift from fact to function. In a free society, facts are discovered, tested, debated. In a planned society, facts are evaluated differently, not by whether they are accurate, but by whether they are useful. Does this statistic help mobilize support? Does this report weaken confidence? Does this criticism undermine unity? The criterion shifts from truth to function. When science becomes instrumental. Hayek is especially concerned about experts. In a planned system, knowledge is no longer dispersed. It is centralized. But centralized knowledge requires selection. Which data matters? Which forecasts guide policy? Which models are acceptable? When the state depends on expert authority, experts begin to depend on the state. The relationship tightens, and objectivity becomes harder to sustain. This is not because scientists become corrupt. It is because incentives change. And when incentives change, truth slowly bends. Moral language under planning. Hayek argues that when planning dominates, even language changes. Words like justice, fairness, and equality lose stable meaning. They become flexible instruments. If yesterday's policy failed, the definition of success shifts. If sacrifices are required, they are framed as necessity. In this way, truth becomes dynamic, not in the scientific sense, but in the political sense. Why this is not just about dictatorships. Hayek is often accused of exaggeration, but his argument here is structural. The more centralized the system, the more it depends on narrative alignment. Even without overt repression, a society that subordinates markets to planning gradually subordinates truth to coordination. This does not happen overnight. It happens incrementally, through incentives, through pressure, through the quiet marginalization of dissent. When truth becomes political, power becomes epistemic. The state no longer merely directs resources, it influences belief. And once belief becomes managed, criticism weakens, self-correction slows, errors compound. This is why Hayek sees the end of truth as a turning point, not because facts disappear, but because their status changes. This is where Hayek and Popper converge. Both feared systems that claim historical inevitability. Both distrusted concentrated knowledge. Both believed that truth requires open criticism. For Popper, the open society depends on falsifiability. For Hayek, the market is a discovery process. But the enemy is the same, a system that cannot admit error, and once error cannot be admitted, truth must be managed. Chapter 11 is not dramatic, it is diagnostic. Hayek is telling us that the loss of economic freedom precedes the loss of intellectual freedom. When planning becomes dominant, truth becomes strategic. And once truth becomes strategic, freedom becomes fragile. In the next chapter, Hayek will move from truth to law. Because once truth becomes flexible, law cannot remain fixed. And when law becomes flexible, power becomes personal. That is the road to serfdom. If this discussion helped clarify Hayek's warning, please leave a like. It helps the work reach others who care about truth and freedom. And subscribe as we continue the series.